positive change in the land. Don't you know that local is locker? Maka maka where we're helping one another. Alone I can go real fast, but when we put our hands together we can go way past. And how do you know? There is power in unity. Everything we ever want is right there in the community. Yeah.
We all can make a difference.
Yeah, you can make a difference.
We'll start by looking within.
Yeah, and it starts with you, y'all.
From dependence to ascendance.
Come on, yeah.
Come on, y'all.
Yeah.
Let's shift the power.
Yeah.
Are you ready, Zambia? Are you ready to shift the power? Are you ready, Zambia? Are you ready to shift the power? Are you ready, Zambia? Are you ready to shift the power? Are you ready,
Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at this special edition of the World Café, which is always set up by Wilde Ganzen and Vice Versa magazine. And this time, together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are talking about shifting the power, and we are in one of the most important powerhouses of the Netherlands, where we do a lot of international cooperation. Now, we started with a song. We're on stage with two special guests, and they don't know it, no. But they have to, they'll be talking, they do know that, but the way we are sitting here does make me feel a little bit like I'm going to ask them to sing us a song, and then we'll have people judge them. We're not going to do that. We're going to have a serious talk about shifting power. And I love that we are doing this conversation, three women on the stage talking about shifting power. And I think that makes it really, really special. Our speakers are also incredibly special. We have some guests joining us from East Africa and from West Africa. So when we talk about shifting power, even in the setup of this, we're talking about that shift. They will join us to think about that shift. As the song that we opened with, which comes from Zambia, mentioned, everything we need is right in the community. So we are realizing more and more that we have our abilities to do a lot, and more as we realize that we're shaping policies, we're shaping the way we collaborate around that. So that's really encouraging. My name is Amma van Danzig, and I get to lead this conversation, and I love that because I have, for many, many reasons. One of the reasons is my Dutch and Ghanaian background, which makes me feel like I'm all about these power shifts because so many of these questions have been with me my whole life. So I do feel like I get to have a really important conversation with two important guests so that I can understand something also about myself, because I'm also caught in this world. So without much more introductory remarks, I would like to introduce you to our two guests, Kitty van der Heijden, who is the Director General of International Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This is Kitty van der Heijden. Can I call you Kitty, or
yes,
do you want me to say Kitty van der Heijden all the time?
No, let's not.
Okay. Kitty, who actually I know for many, many years, so it's great to be here discussing shifting the power with you now.
Likewise.
And we have Birgitta Tazelaar, who is her deputy. So she's the Deputy Director of International Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So really powerhouses sitting here with little old me to talk about shifting the power. And so we thought to do this, where shall we start? I think we should start with you. So maybe, Kitty, you can tell us a little bit more about who you are and what motivates you to do the work that you do, because you've been doing this work for quite a while. What motivates you to do it?
Yeah, I think that's probably more interesting than telling you who I am, because I think really what I would say what shapes me, what makes me to what I am, is I would say a deep, deep intrinsic motivation to weed out poverty and to eradicate inequalities, whether that's within a country or between countries from this world. That is what motivates me. That's what makes me get out of my bed, make long hours, and I can never achieve any of these objectives by acting alone. So for me, everything we do in the Foreign Office, both me individually in my role as Director General, but also with all the colleagues, it is looking at where do we find partnerships to go faster, to accelerate, as was mentioned in the little movie from Zambia, and to really find connection with the local community, because that's where poverty really is.
Yeah.
That's where the problem is. It's partly also where the solutions are. So
Yeah. Great. So I hope we'll hear more from you later about the relationship between poverty and inequality. But I'll leave you for now and ask you, Birgitta, why do you want to have this conversation? Why should we be talking about this at all? Because I do want to highlight that it's really special that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a holder of power, wants to talk about this.
Well, I think we can debate whether we are the holder of power. But this is the problem between Kitty and myself. We consciously did not compare notes, but very often we find ourselves at the same place. So for me as well, inequality and sustainability are the most important subjects that I want to change in life. And I strongly believe this is not something that we can do ourselves. So our power, I think, is really very limited. We can only make that change and that system change that we need together with the private sector, with local organizations, with other governments. Only together we can really make a change.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to be here and to engage with each other.
With each other, yeah. No, I really love this idea of working together to get rid of inequality and to create sustainability. Any man at home, don't think that this is a women's topic. It's about all of us. But this is, so now I want to know, what is your definition of shifting the power, and what are the underlying concepts of Southern leadership and localization, Kitty?
Look, I tend to be very practical, right? So you can have a big semantic debate about what it is and definitions. To me, really, if you want to eradicate poverty from this world, you cannot do that thinking from the Netherlands. This has to be done jointly. If you do that jointly, you're going to have to always look at the entire chain of power relationship, whether that is me talking to a Dutch NGO with a local NGO. This goes through all of what we do. We find these relationships. And for me, shifting the power is really throughout that entire chain. Are we talking based on equality, based on equity? There will always be a difference. Let's be honest. I sit on a lot of money, and I want to spend that in the most responsible way, but with the local communities in mind, because that's where the poverty is, that's where my target population is. And that means that they have to engage with me, and I have to engage with them to really understand their realities that can shape our policies. That's basically what, to me, shifting the power is about. And that's not just about, and I'm sometimes a bit frustrated with that, it's not just about, do we give money to local organizations? Yes, we have to do that. Absolutely. But it's also about how do we find ways and new modalities of working so that local communities are engaging with us to infuse us with their thinking, to allow us basically to shape better programs and policies. So it really comes through grassroots thinking, through engagement. So it is, to me, it's localization of aid, but it's also empowerment through voice.
Yeah. Okay, so really having this voice of people in communities here when we are making policies, when we are making budgetary decisions, and so on and so forth. And I'm happy that you mentioned that you're sitting on a lot of money, because I'll be checking under your chair soon. But I do think that that's what a lot of us think, right? So you are sitting on a lot of money, and that money represents a commitment, represents influence, and therefore power, because you can make a lot of things happen. Could you help me understand a little bit what the shift is? Because in many ways, we've always wanted the voices of community, haven't we?
Yes, I think we've always wanted that, but we haven't always put it into practice, right? So the traditional way of working is more through, and that's the way we've organized it, through Dutch NGOs that then build the capacity of local NGOs. I think if you look at what we've done with Power of Voices, we've very consciously tried to shift that balance to make sure that local NGOs are not just part and parcel of a partnership, but that they're also leading partnership. If you look at Leading from the South, for example, it is really consciously giving women's organizations from the South a seat at the table so they can raise their voice because it needs to happen. I don't think that has always necessarily been embedded in our thinking. Yeah. And frankly speaking, I don't think we're there yet. right? I think we're making steps in the right direction, but to me, having this conversation really is also about listening, it's about learning. And I had colleagues too that said, are you crazy? You're going into the lion's den. This is not the lion's den. We're here among friends because I truly believe we all have the same objectives.
Yeah.
So we may not always agree how we get there, but for us to be infused with different thinking is enriching. And so that's why I'm here.
Yeah, no, that's really, really great. And thank you for removing the lion's den idea, because it's quite friendly. If it is the lion's den, it's the friendliest lion's den I've ever been in. So, and so when we've heard what it is, so making these connections, having the voice of communities here when we are making decisions. So what practices within the Development Corporation are no longer acceptable when it comes to the balance of power? What are some of the things that we've done that we've learned we shouldn't be doing anymore?
Well, we should not think on behalf of the other. So I think it's an old concept. In the old days, we used to talk about ownership. Whose ownership? Localization. Whose localization? But to engage with those people, those change agents that can actually make a difference towards that system change, towards less inequality, towards more sustainability, and to work together with them, that's of course essential. So it is completely unthinkable that that is not happening. So it's out of the question that somebody here in this so-called powerhouse will sit behind a desk and think about what is needed for someone else somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that I think is the fundamental thing.
Fundamental thing. No longer deciding here, listening, collaborating, listening to hear the voices of people and using that information to shape policy.
Absolutely, and together with many partners. And again here, I think also, for example, the private sector, they have really stepped up in their responsibility when it comes to corporate social responsibility, engaging in topics like living wage, like Unilever did not so long ago, extremely important steps. And here you see also how civil society, private sector, governments are working together all towards that same goal.
Yeah. And that is working, right? So civil society, private sector, and government working together to hear voices and adjust, respond to what we hear, so that we get a greater whole towards sustainability and
less inequality and inclusion. That's absolutely it's what we call the golden triangle, or the diamond, and that works really well. Absolutely, and I think it is probably also still a challenge to include also southern private sector. It's important to have the internationals, the multinationals. They're doing, I think, a great job. But how to include the local private sector? I think that's a challenge ahead of us.
Yeah. So we're talking about this hearing the voice of people who are actually typically not properly listened to. We've often said it, but we haven't listened to them. So how can the principles of Shift the Power be incorporated into the new policy framework? How will we do that? Well, I'll start with you, Kitty.
Look, it's a difficult time to answer that question, I would say, because I have no idea what the new government will bring. I don't know which political parties will be in charge, let alone that I know what the personal preference of my new boss will be. Yeah. Right. So, as humble civil servants rather than powerhouses, what I can say is what I would like to discuss with the minister, and that always starts with, why are we doing this? Why do we have this debate? Because we want to weed out poverty and inequality. Yeah. And that means shifting the power, and that means giving voice, and that means working where poverty is through local actors because they understand the reality. Is that all there is? No, there will also be a lot of funding needed to do other work with other actors, but it is about how do we complement and give that voice. Yeah. I do think we need sometimes a more, I would say, open debate about power relationships. It's never easy. But there's a Dutch saying, which is a bit hard to translate into English, sorry. Maar als het wrijft, gaat het glanzen.
Yeah.
And civil society obviously often
with
rubs...
friction, you get shine.
You get shine. Yeah. And that's their role.
Yeah.
And I'm totally okay with that. And I think that's good. And I think we can be incredibly proud as the Netherlands that we spend 1.4 billion with NGOs in partnerships to really give... southern and northern NGOs, precisely that role.
Yeah.
To speak up, to speak out, to hold governments and other actors accountable. And so pleiten en bezorgen, the heart of power of voices to me is something that we should continue, but then also spread beyond the power of voices.
Yeah. Somebody got an email.
And then, of course, there is the issue. I do think it's an important one and a relevant one around how do we fund local organizations, right? Does it always have to go through a northern organization? No. But how do we do that? What processes and procedures do we need? And I think this is where we need to have a really good, mature conversation, because I'm also bound by law, by certain rules and regulations. I may not like them. I recognize that they may sometimes impede localization of aid, but we have laws, and I have to abide by them. So where do we find flexibility? What can we do, rather than saying what we can't do? What can we do? And I think we have found ways, both in Power of Voices, but also in some other programs. We're now programming our first 10-year program.
Great.
Why? Because we want to engage with local community and give them voice and transform local realities. You don't do that in 3 years.
No.
Right? So we are trying ways, and again, I'm here also to listen and learn. What do you think we should do? We don't know it all.
No, we don't.
Maybe after
but
this
indeed,
conversation.
like listening. But actually, I'm going to have a little backstage conversation with Birgitta, because Kitty was just talking about the Dutch government and northern NGOs and funding. Can you give us a 10-second crash course in how development cooperation works? What is this money? Because I thought you guys just have the money, but you're saying you're humble civil servants. So your money, what are these mechanisms? How is it going?
So some of the money goes to multilateral organizations.
It comes from?
From the taxpayer.
Yeah, okay, good. I just wanted, because we're doing this in English, so there are more people listening. So it's tax money
Absolutely.
that comes to you, that you send to multilateral organizations.
To NGOs in the south, in the north, and we work with private sector, we work with academia, so a lot of partners.
So that billion, 1.4 billion?
So the total amount that we're spending per year is 3 billion.
3, wow.
And a lot of that money goes to local organizations or international NGOs.
Okay.
The 1.4 billion, that's for a larger period, for a 5-year period. But a large amount from the yearly 3 billion goes to NGOs as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for getting me up to speed, so I understand Kitty better.
Technical.
Okay. No, so this is clearer to us. So it's actually also very much a political process where what we vote here in the Netherlands determines
Absolutely.
What happens in terms of how much money is available for engaging with Global South communities. So I think that's important for us to say in English, because we say it very easily in Dutch.
So maybe I can add one thing, because
Sure.
I think what Kitty mentioned on the Power of Voices, that program, 60% of the alliances that we're funding now include local organizations.
Okay.
In the previous batch, that used to be 13%, from 13 to 60. So that's a huge change.
That's really a huge shift already.
Huge shift already.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then also those organizations that have actually are in the lead. It used to be 6%, it's now 12%. So again, here you see a shift in power.
Yeah, it's doubled up. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that. And thank you for giving us some of the data. So I have here, Corday Director Kees Zevenbergen said in Vice Versa magazine that truly shifting power is very difficult because it's ingrained in the mindset of development experts that they know better and should provide the solution. Now, I have a master's degree in international development, so I recognize this. How do you change that mindset? It's a very easy question for you, Kitty. How are we going to change that mindset?
The frank answer is I don't know. I also think the frank answer is that I hope, at least for myself, but for many people, that we don't have that mindset anymore. We are not, development cooperation isn't something that we have started a year ago. We've been doing this for 60 years. And I absolutely believe that when this was started, it came with a certain mindset. I also still believe that there are many people that hold this type of mindset. But if Birgitta and I sit opposite someone in my office with that mindset, that's where the door is.
Yeah. Okay.
That is not what we tolerate. That is not how we want to be. Does it happen? It happens. Is it what we aim to be? Absolutely not. That's why this debate is so important. Yeah. And so if we do sometimes unconsciously, exhibit this type of behavior, I hope that everybody finds the comfort in how we are and how we engage with others, be they NGOs, be they our own staff, that they speak up and speak out and say, this isn't the right behavior. So it may happen. I don't believe that that is how we program. I don't believe that that is how we work. We are trying, honestly, I would say, to be an organization that learns. I'm sure we still have lots to learn on this. That's why we're here. But it's definitely not a mindset. And if it is, I don't think I would be leading this organization.
Okay. Well, these are strong words.
Yes, but I feel quite strongly about these things.
This, yeah. No, and that's really good. I just, because it's deeply ingrained and it's built on so many years of a certain type of relationship, I can see the commitment to changing that mindset, and I can see that this has happened, like to reject that mindset. But I wonder how deeply ingrained this is. I think one of the only ways we can find this out is by listening to people. So I would like us to move to the second part of this conversation, because we're talking about mindset now, and we're talking about systems change and the role of Southern civil society organizations and community-based organizations. And we will now invite our friends Charles Kojo VanDyck, who is joining us from Ghana. He's the head of capacity development of the West African Civil Society Institute, WACCI. And we have Rachael Mwikali, an activist, feminist, and founder of the Coalition for Grassroots Human Rights Defender. She's a human rights defender in Kenya. So we've got East and West here with us. And I am sure you've been listening to us, Rachael and Charles. Yes, okay. So, as you've heard then, we're talking about shifting the power and Southern leadership. Now what do I pick? I'll pick Rachael first. What does this mean to you personally, Rachael?
Thank you so much. And thank you also to Kitty, Birgitta. That was very informative. And I'm really humbled and honored to sharing the platform with amazing and powerful women that are also holding the power. So for me, when you talk about this conversation, and it's something that's also coming from a really, really grassroots community, that is Madara Informal Settlement, which is the second largest informal settlement in Kenya, with an estimate of 500,000 people. And the work we do also as grassroots organizations, as Coalition for Grassroots Human Rights Defender, and also as a human rights defender and a feminist, is that yes, there's power in terms of also the conversation around who was the budget. And this is something that I've been thinking around, even the financing and investment of also like local grassroots organizations, that we are doing a lot of fantastic work. But most of the time also with the compliance of the donor perspective, usually we feel as grassroots organizations usually put aside. And having this conversation, it's the right time, especially now that you're seeing there's a lot of also rise of also majority of right-wing government, and where a lot of women's rights issue like gender justice and feminism at stake. And it just brings me back also to the issue of patriarchy. And patriarchy meaning, yes, we might also, for example, be the women in power, but are we the ones controlling the budget, or are the guys the ones controlling the budget? So for me, I feel as much as we're having this conversation, we need also to rethink in terms, I really like what both of you said. It's not a competition. It's about collaborative of both Global South and Global North. And especially when it comes to like women-led or grassroots-led young feminist organization. And looking also the way you work, especially also in Kenya, you're doing a lot of fantastic work, and also keeping in mind with people like Vice Versa, who also like made my voice to be heard there in the space in Holland. So I can imagine if, for example, there wasn't Vice Versa who were working with local organizations like ourselves or myself, like where will my power be as Rachael Mwikali, or many of people like Rachael Mwikali? So I still believe that also like one of my recommendations in terms of the power discussion is also like I know it can be hectic with system most of the time, but also like to try as much as possible scout new upcoming or new feminist-led or human rights defenders-led organization that also can have this investment that we are fighting all the inequalities. Because you can imagine, and I was giving an example even with the issue of vaccine, like Madare, it's very congested, but still, because inequality has been there, but with COVID, it has been put into naked eye where people can't say it hasn't been existing. So the point is also like trying to see like the investment also goes to local grassroots-led organization. And I'm happy like hearing the discussion being led with men. The beauty, and I'm not biased of us women, is that when women are in leadership, things don't go wrong. Like it's usually about the people, not individualistic, like I person, but we person. And I like the way this conversation is going in terms of putting our heads together and seeing also like how even your local embassy with different countries can be also incorporated in supporting these local organizations.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rachel. And this is what Rachel was referring to. She was on the cover of Vice Versa magazine. Here, we are giving you props, Rachel. So having a voice here is through platforms like Vice Versa. But of course, it's about budgets. It's about transcending ego, really going towards one shared goal and saying, like, we want a world without poverty. We want a sustainable world. We want equality. We want inclusion. And that if we all come together, we can create this. Now, before we go on, because we're going to get more and more input, I want to tell the people at home that you can send in your questions on a chat. I have this fantastic iPad over here. I will get your questions here. We have a team. You can see the three of us, but there's actually a whole team that is making this possible. So if you have questions, please send them through. Your questions can be answered immediately on chat, and later on in the program, we'll have a moment to address those questions with our guests, both locally and internationally. So you will also have a voice in this space. Charles, are you there? Yes. Can you hear me, Charles?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, okay. I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. So what do you think of the mindset of Western development practitioners? What is your experience with Western development practitioners, and what do you think of their mindsets?
That's an interesting question. I think it's important that the question was phrased mindset, because I believe that in order for us to shift power, we need to shift the mindset both in the global north and in the global south. And so when we are talking about mindsets, we're talking about perceptions, we're talking about assumptions that has influenced the way aid has been structured and delivered over the years. Right. And I remember one of our colleagues from Netherlands was just saying about how the ministry has been doing the work for over 60 years and have got experience. So things are changing. And that is true to some extent. But unfortunately, there's still this notion that there's a part of the world that needs saving, right? And the other part of the world is supposed to save this part of the world. So we still have that as really underlying a lot of the way our aid is structured. If you look at the structure, the processes, how resourcing is allocated, what it has done is it's perpetuated kind of like a dependency culture, right? So it's made a lot of communities and actors and local organizations passive recipients instead of active citizens. It is true that a lot of countries, including the Netherlands, have made significant changes through the Power of Voices program, and we need to commend the Dutch ministry for that. You can see that there's a shift, right? But the truth of the matter is that, unfortunately, funding, money is still the ultimate currency of value in terms of assets. So when we look at assets and we are working with communities, we always look at from a resources lens. We don't look at other issues like maybe social capital, maybe expertise, intellectual capital, the trust kind of capital that communities have, and really quantify that as their contribution to their own development. So these are some of the challenges we have with the aid architecture. Another challenge, which is I think you're very familiar with, Amma and colleagues, is that we still feel that most of our relationship is transactional, right? We are kind of always put in a position to become like subcontractors. And the focus is always on specific projects, activities, short-term, ad hoc. And so I like to describe it as more of a funding relationship instead of an empowering and nurturing partnership in the true sense. And so that is one of the features which is manifested because of, I believe, the mindset from both sides. And then,
Charles,
of course,
Charles, can I ask you, because I think this is really helpful how you're describing this, and I'm wondering, in this mindset, with these 60 years of development cooperation that is more transactional, short-term, project-based, subcontracted, what do you think that does to the mindset of people around you or in the global south? And how do you think that mindset is shifting, has shifted, or should shift?
Fantastic question. So what it's created, it has created communities that feel, they don't feel that their own worth and their own voices matter or are recognized. It's created a situation where communities are waiting basically for handouts. It created a dependency culture. It's not building ownership. We are having communities that are not actually determining their own development agenda. Basically, they're not leading from the front. And we all know, and it's been proven over significant number of years, that if you want to change communities, if you want to reduce inequality and poverty, the community themselves should be at the forefront of that change, right? So it's a very much dependency situation. And so what we have is that it's almost like coming to help us. It's not a co-investment kind of mindset. And I think that's what we need to shift. We need to transition from that typical charity mindset to a co-investment mindset where communities say that, look, this is what we are trying to do. We welcome your partnership to help us to achieve what we are coming to do.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is a really great input. I see our two guests in the room taking notes. If you see your words in any policy document, they took notes here. Because I think this is really interesting what you're saying. You're both talking about budget, who holds the budget. You're talking about co-investorship, Charles. And so I wonder, can that also be budget? Or do you mean that we should all have access to under Kitty's chair? We should all be able to access the money under Kitty's chair. Or do you think we ourselves, or you yourselves, I'm also part of the Global South, I would say, should be co-investing? We should also be putting our money there. What are you suggesting exactly?
So what I'm suggesting is that when we are designing programs, we need to do a very much a cold analysis of the assets that are there, but not put so much premium only on money. And so when you are going to engage with the community, the understanding should be they need to contribute something. It may not be money, but they can contribute their expertise, they can contribute their time, they can contribute, the trust that they have with communities and local government. They can contribute the historical ties that they have, the power of their networks, and that should be integrated into program designing. And beyond that, we should together then determine what success will look like. So what are the measures of success?
Yeah.
Success should reflect the community's interests, right? And so I think what that helps is that it builds ownership from the community. It empowers the communities to become much more resilient and really understand and benefit from what I call a real partnership.
Yeah.
What we have these days, there's a buzzword, co-creation, right? It's a beautiful word, or co-construction. I think it was formulated with great intent, but you cannot have co-creation when already the framework is decided, the timelines are decided, and the budget is already, to a large extent, decided. How can you have co-creation, right? So that is not co-creation in the true sense of the word, because what that means is that from conceptual stage, communities were not involved in determining what that program specifically will be. What happened was they were invited to participate to see how the program can be implemented, but not how the program can be conceived. And I
All
think
right.
that is the missing gap.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Charles. This is very helpful input. So we really have to go from this transactional relationship of, okay, we've decided this is what we've seen, this is what we've heard, so this is what we're going to do. Now go and do it. You go and do it in the community. And we have to become really more literally cooperative. So co-creating, co-constructing, really at the conceptual level, from the level of concept, and not once we've decided concepts and then reach out to the global south and say, can you do it? Okay, I'll do it. Bye-bye. Rachel, are you there? I'd like to go back to you. Yes, there's Rachel. So what is it? You've also been listening to Charles and what he's saying. I see from your smile that you think what he said is really interesting, and you have a lot to add to that. But I want to start with a question to you, which is, what is the strength of your organization and the role that you can play to create this shift in power? And maybe you can add there, what is that strength that maybe your organization has been that has been overlooked in these types of relations?
Like I really like the conversation, the way we are going, and I'll give a good example, which as Coalition for Grassroots Human Rights Defender, which is sort of different from a mainstream civil society organizing, is that majority of us, the work we do is because of the passion, conviction, of the violence and inequality that majority of us have gone through growing up or within the local community. And that's why you'll see for us, even when before people started speaking about the shrinking civic space, for us, it had already shrunk. And we had find now ways of to work even when it was not working for us. The fact that majority of us are not donor funded. And I would organize with community and say, here there's an issue of human rights violation. How do we deal with it? First, community member will come, or members say, let's contribute as community so that we are able to take this woman to the hospital. And then from there, we can take her to report, or if it's an issue of public, let's say, case litigation, like the famous one, which we did during this time of COVID, is that there was, when COVID struck in Kenya, that was 13th of March, people were told to stay at home and work from home and social distance, which is a luxury for majority of us living in informal settlements. You're telling us to wash our hands, but we don't have water. What else? Our constitution states clearly, every Kenyan has a right to clean water and sanitation. So you'd find the best language that our government would really understand was us demonstrating. So we had to use the best possible way. That was also like for some of us that have privilege of owning a smartphone, is that we did small video share with different national or international organizations to be able to put pressure in our government. And that's when now we started receiving water, though still it's not like it's sorted. So you could see like the traditional way of organizing, it has helped us and supported our organizing where it's community-led. That's why I think our organizing is a bit different from our comrade Charles in terms of the level of mainstream, is that for us it starts from the local community. And the reason why for us it can be a bit difficult is sustaining, because our community also expects you're like an ambulance 24/7. You're responding to human rights issue, but also you need what I was talking about, the budget. Like if it's admin work, if it's about even documenting, if it's about also like moving from one location to another. So even like coming to this point of discussion, I really like the way we are putting our heads together in terms of seeing where do we move and where do we go. It's a matter of also like looking these issues in terms of intersectionality, which has been a key part of our organization, that we don't pick cherry like this rights matter compared to this one. So being that we are a network of different struggles, is that when a matter arises, we don't say this is not our framework. We usually like, let's deal with it as a community and let's look for partners that we can partner and engage with them. And also like I have to give also a plus to Stein. She played a critical role, even your Dutch government here in Nairobi, coming up also with different civil society organizations, the Human Rights Award. So you'd see at least there's that voices of ground that has never been heard being made visible. So the idea is that as grassroots organization, as coalition, our numbers and working within the local community support us. But you'll see if a donor wants to work with us, they'll be like, are we sure we can trust these people working in the local community? Yeah. Which we feel also locks us in the discussion. And we feel that it's not okay, because already we bring our intellectual labor, already we bring the numbers. Already also we bring, like, for example, if the Dutch government objective, if, for example, is working on a sexual reproductive health and rights, we're able to say we did in a collaboration, which also gives visibility the Dutch government also here. So in my thought, it's just the matter of idea of also like trusting local also community and learning from them on our local initiative and solutions are working. And you can read vice versa. I hope you have read it. Like on how we're using different mechanisms to ensure things were working, that even now governments are to come to learn from us and involve us, especially when also dealing with cases of violence against women and girls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is a really great insight, Rachel. Thank you so much for your words and for your ideas. And what I actually see both you and Charles doing is redefining what resources means. So you both talk about budgets, but actually you are both also defining the resources that you bring to the table that nobody else can. So that is the thing that when we talk about partnership, let's not only say, I brought 1 million, how much did you bring? Because that's not partnership. That's how the transactional relationship is maintained. However, that 1 million cannot be spent without your hard work and labor, your capacities, your people, your knowledge, your historical knowledge, your cultural context that you bring to the table. So I would like to give each of you a brief moment to just answer straightforward, what could the Dutch government and Dutch donors do differently? Because we have two very powerful people, yes, they're powerful, sitting here with pen and paper, taking notes. So give them 3 points. What should they do differently? 1, 2, 3, from each of you. We'll start with Charles. What should they do differently?
I think one they've started to do very well with the Power of Voices is really giving more local participation, centering it around communities leading, which is great. So the program design, looking at defining resources beyond money and recognizing other types of resources in the program design, that will be the first thing I'll say. Flexible funding, which I think is also, I've seen an improvement, much more long-term, 3 to 5 years funding, instead of the short-term ad hoc funding, which is not really helping organizations. What it does is that, you know, the focus of short-term funding is sustaining projects, but not actually sustaining organizations and the actual ecosystem. And then I think another thing that the government can also do is to support sustainability of organizations and resilience. And so to really look at how they can support holistically the ecosystem in the Global South. So how do you help Global South organizations diversify their resources? How can you help them explore and experiment with alternative funding opportunities and mechanisms? How can you help them in terms of technology adoption to improve their efficiency and effectiveness? And here, technology, not only software access, but also hardware. And then I think the last thing I'll say, which would be great, that could be the Dutch government could support, is a much more investment in the documentation and the amplification of community-led development and community philanthropy. I think community-led development and community philanthropy will help us really shift the power to communities.
Can you explain that a little bit? What do you mean by community-led philanthropy? And
okay, so what I mean is, strengthening the capacities of communities and local actors to mobilize resources from their own constituencies, and so that people out there not only just give for humanitarian or emergency reasons, but also for social justice and for development, and also helping these same constituencies or local actors tap into things like the diaspora, remittances from the diaspora, which is a huge thing in the Global South. So it's all part of the alternative resourcing streams, which I think programs and the Dutch government can promote to help that ecosystem in the Global South. That will reduce dependency, that will increase the confidence of the people.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charles. As is known of people in, for example, Ghana and the Global South, Charles has been very generous. I said 3, he gave you 4. So, Rachel, please, what would you advise the Dutch government to do? What would be your advice?
So on my side, one, it's reduce the restrictions of funding local organizations. I know there's this thing of compliance and what they need, or like trust us. Like if we can be able also to risk our life to defend human rights, trust us with the resources, and also like allow also that partnership of having Kenyan consortium. And when I mean Kenyan consortium, also it's not only of the famous like celebrity activists, but also like local activists that are working within the local community and feminists. So that's one. Secondly, what I would recommend is that having this kind of conversation whereby let's say the embassy here, and I'll be biased this one on people who have been on exile and risk like myself, and Stein also knows that, is that sometimes when the rubber hits the roads, when we are calling out our governments because of the injustice or not following the rule of law, it puts us in a lot of trouble, and we might need visas sometimes. Is the embassy like open in terms of supporting or even having supportive statement of us activists? And this also goes back also to the ministry. They are supporting the embassy here to engage with the local community, which means if, for example, my police officer who has criminalized me sees me with an ambassador, he'll never say I'm a criminal, because they usually use that, especially against us women human rights defender. So that would be also another part of it. Thirdly, invest in also like local intellectual labor. I've seen like a lot of work when it comes to our field. We give, but we don't receive in terms of, we did this with this community. What's your feedback in terms of also accountability? So if we are getting to this relationship of global South and global North relationship, let's ensure like we are here primarily like together working on this issue. I'm not seeing like we are only the recipient part, but also that we are also people producing knowledge. And this one also will go back to the masterclass we are planning to do also with vice versa. I would really like even want to see the reciprocative sister with solidarity of the global solidarity, where we are able to see how even like the Dutch and the minister, both Birgitta and Kitty, being part of this conversation, because it means also there's that intergenerational learning. Intergenerational learning meaning also like as a young feminist, as a Black feminist from a community that is usually discriminated, I'm able to see that this global solidarity, it's also reciprocating in terms of the work we do, which is also like you based there. You're able like to appreciate and also like support our local initiative. The other one, which is the last one, maybe there are so many.
Yeah.
Like for example, borrow from the what I'm doing now with the the Denmark government. Have local youth advisory boards that are also feminist boards that can be able to advise your government on what to improve in terms of development cooperation or what will be the recommendation. Because also realizing majority of us, we are young people. Globally and even within the continent. So like there's fresh of new idea and involvement of new idea. So please engage us. Don't let old people speak on our behalf. We are here, we think, we're innovator, we are creative, and we have been in this space, we have an experience. So utilize our intellectual labor. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, did you finish taking notes? Yeah. Look at that. Look at that. You've directly influenced policy, I have to say. Thank you so much for your generosity, Charles and Rachel. Now, I see that I have about a minute and a half on the clock for our exchange. And we're going to try and show that we can do this. Because, you know, you've given very concrete ideas and directions on what we should do. How we can change our relationships, what resources are there, what resource actually means, what power means, what resource means, and how we can align this so that we can listen to each other, learn from each other, and actually together have shared impact for a more sustainable and equal world. But then I want to go to this last question. What would the ideal division of roles between donors, institutions, and institutions such as WAXI, and grassroots organizations such as yours, Rachel, what would the division of roles actually look like? You have half a minute each. You can do it. I believe in you.
Yeah. So for me, I believe each one of us has their role, like Birgitta and Kitty being there, like, you know, you control our budget, just ensure like it gets to the ground and get our recommendation. And also like from your side, tell us this what it can be in terms of reciprocative, because there are things that will influence the local community or with policymakers here that you can't do it.
Yeah.
But there's that part, you holding the budget, which I like the budget holder part, when also as we have in that budget, it influences our work.
Yeah.
So that's why I keep on insisting. It's not a competition, it's a collaborative. So let's collaborate. I would really love if I can see even us and grassroots organization collaborating more with the Dutch government here in Kenya. I would really love. So if there are more restrictions, please try make it loosen.
Yeah. So
that at least it engages more organizations doing fantastic work like ourselves as Coalition for Grassroots Human Rights Defender.
Yeah.
But also let it be also young-led or feminist-led or young people-led.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Rachel. You have a clear mission here. You've repeated it a few times. So really authentic collaboration is what you're calling for. Let it be authentic. Let there be a level playing field. Let everybody play along from their strengths. You are there on the ground. You know what's going on. Play along from your strengths, and let the Dutch do what they can do from their strength and do it in a feminist and a young way. Charles, what would you like to add in terms of the division of roles? How are these roles, how can they be divided better? How can we work together better in the roles that we play?
No, I think more support for local actors to do more of the direct implementation will be great. Looking beyond just projects, but looking at the whole ecosystem, the sustainability of these vehicles or these organizations, which are actually resources. And then, of course, organizations like WACC that are more regional and are do more capacity building. We can be the connectors, we can be the conveners, we can be the facilitators, we can be the ones helping with the documentation of our own learning. We can be the ones that are the voices, representing the voices of this constituency, civil society constituency, with also with the global north. And so these are the kind of roles that I see. And I believe that when we are able to empower organizations, especially grassroots organizations, more to be the ones who are actually leading and actually implementing projects on the ground, we'll start to see more significant results.
Fantastic. Thank you both for engaging in this rapid wrap-up.
Sorry, I have
yes,
one, if you don't mind.
Of course,
Sorry,
yes.
yeah.
Please.
So I was thinking also like our issues like human rights work or human rights or feminism work is not like a program that will take like 6 months or anything. It's important also to invest like long-term investment, like let's say 10 years funding or 5-year funding. But I think sometimes also with the high rising of opposition, if you say it's 6 months, it takes long even to realize the results. Like for example, on like access to safe abortion, if you're mapping the opposition, it will not take like 1 month. So if you find one month or 6 months or 1 year, by the time you come also to look at the impact, it seems like you haven't invested. So long-term investment is really important.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you for that addition, because that's very much in line with what Kitty has said and what the Dutch Ministry or International Cooperation is already committed to. More 10-year programs. I think we can even try harder to go even longer if we want to be sustainable. We can't have short-term project-based transactions. We need authentic collaboration. I think you guys have been fantastic. Thank you so much for your submissions, for your points. I won't summarize those, because if I do that, I'll eat into the time for the questions and answers. And we have questions coming in. There are so many coming in. So I'll start with the questions that came in first. So here's a question from Daniela Hirsch, director of Both Ends, about the role of embassies. Because you have your embassies. Mm-hmm. How are we going to ensure that the dual mission that embassies have, promoting both human rights and Dutch business, does not come at the expense of local activists? She goes on to say, especially in the fossil sector, this is a problem. More and more human rights defenders do not want new oil, ash, and coal, and they are increasingly harshly dealt with and suppressed. Often Dutch companies are involved. Isn't it time the embassies stopped facilitating fossil industries? Shall I ask Kitty?
I always get all the easy questions, right?
He's the climate person.
Hi, Daniela. Very nice question. Look, I think we have to be honest that in the embassies they represent the broad foreign office, right? They represent the entire kingdom, including the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate, including the trade arm of this ministry. We may have our internal differences of what needs to happen. From a local activist perspective, I can fully understand that we need to change it. On the other hand, policies, national policies here, are of course settled by the cabinet in the regeerakkoord with parliament. At this moment, that includes a certain amount of fossil fuels in the trade policy. However, we also have a motion in parliament, the motie Sjoerdsma, that all the instruments of the foreign policy of the government of the Netherlands should be made Paris compliant. So while I don't think we have reached the climate nirvana yet in policy terms, I do think changes are coming. I think they're also quite inevitable. And so we need to learn from those types of trade-offs that she put in this question to make sure that we avoid these trade-offs and take the local communities as our entry point.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're not there yet, but I think work in progress.
Are we going fast enough though? Because we don't have a lot of
in climate terms overall?
Yeah, in climate terms. So she's asking specifically about fossil industries, yeah. Because the change is coming. And you, I mean, of course, you are representing, you're a humble civil servant in a ministry, and you are sort of stuck with the cabinet and parliament. But do you think that we are, I mean, stuck, I can say it like that. I mean more like you have to negotiate with these important parties. Yeah, I forgot their cameras here. But how do you think it's going fast enough? Or is there anything that you could do to make that go faster, especially because human rights defenders are treated so harshly and suppressed?
Look, let me say that this morning we had the management board of this ministry, and what was number one topic on the agenda? It was climate.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so are we going fast enough? I think everybody in the management board recognizes that we're not going fast enough.
Okay.
As a world community, as the Netherlands, all of us. But those directions are set at political level. And that's the differentiation of labor between a minister and working with parliament and a civil servant. Do we feel the urgency? Are we trying to make it? Absolutely. And I think from the development cooperation perspective, I think if you look at what we do and have done in the past year, we're at the moment at 1.2 billion each year for climate finance, half of which comes from our budget, the public sector budget, half of which comes from the private sector, but leveraged, crowded in by the ODA budget, half of which is adaptation, which really is more important, I would say, for local communities than anything else, and the other half is for mitigation. That is a far cry from what others do, both in terms of your fair share in the climate finance, but also in making sure that local communities, particularly in Africa, get what they need. That's adaptation programs right now. And in the way we shape those programs, local knowledge is essential.
Yeah.
And that is the starting point for our adaptation programs.
Yeah.
So I think we're trying to get there. Are we there yet? Absolutely not.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Also for accommodating my freeness. There's another question from Edwin Huizing, Director of HIVOS. What do you think is a good business model for civil society? Following on that, he says, wouldn't a logical follow-up to Power of Voices, which Charles has referred to, and promoting local ownership be to go back to institutional support and long-term funding until 2030? Birgitta, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, another tricky question from Edwin, whom I know from my time in Botswana, actually, when we were both working for SNV. I think, to be honest, I'm more charmed by what Charles said when it comes to a good business model. Because I think he very clearly laid out the importance of the community-led philanthropy. And I strongly believe that if you want to have system change, that you need to be well ingrained into your own society. You need to have a constituency. Without a constituency, you will not have power, you cannot change things. So organizations that entirely depend upon foreign funding, I've seen them, many of them, when I was working in Africa or in the Middle East, the governments will just tend to say these are foreign agents. Or even foreign spies in those days. So I really think it is extremely important that we, of course, there can be a partnership, but that we find ways and help each other in this local philanthropy. And that can be businesses, it can be a membership system, it can be rich people. There are a lot of rich people in Africa nowadays as well. Yeah. And why should they not also share some of their richness to good local communities? Well.
Yeah, no, this is really great. Thank you so much, Charles, for bringing in that concept of community-based philanthropy. I think it's a very interesting concept to explore and also to look at in terms of role divisions. How does that look like? Is it collaborative? Do we invest together with the ministry, enrich people locally, or maybe even community-based funding locally? Very interesting ideas to explore. We have more questions coming in. I don't have a lot of time for them, but I will take this one here. Is there a shift in the power relations between the Dutch government and the government of its partner countries? It appears that the instruments that were geared to giving more power to partner governments, like sector budgets, have disappeared. Yes,
that's correct.
So,
we used to pay governments and through budget support, either on the global level for the whole budget or for the, let's say, their budget for education or health, so sectoral budget, and we've completely moved away from that about almost 10 years ago now. So the funding is no longer going, or hardly going. There's maybe a little bit of cooperation with governments, but to a very limited extent. Most of it is going to NGOs, multilateral organizations, private sector, etc. But through the EU, I must say, and a part of our funding is also going to the EU, and the EU is still giving budget support to countries.
Okay, so it hasn't disappeared completely.
Not completely.
It's more channeled differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a question here from Paul van den Berg. One of the challenges to shift the power is risk sharing in the chain, from donor to local implementing organizations. What happens now is often risk transfer, which means that the local organizations are faced with the bulk of the risks, from fiduciary to security risk. Okay. Fiduciary to security risk. And how will the ministry stimulate a process from risk transfer to risk sharing? I see both of you nodding, so you recognize this risk.
I can maybe share a little bit of that, because it's a very important topic within the humanitarian aid system and within the grand bargain discussions that we're having. And our Minister Sigrid Kaag, she was the eminent person for the last couple of years, and together with ICRC, the International Red Cross, she took the initiative to put this on the agenda. And it is completely correct what is being said. We need to better share risks. It's true, with the frontliners, they bear the risk when it comes to security. Sometimes their bank accounts are blocked because they work in areas where there is also terrorism. So there are a lot of risks they're taking. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to find ways for better protection. We have to find ways for overhead financing for those organizations, and also understand that maybe the same demands when it comes to fiduciary issues are difficult. Of course, we also have our accountancy firm checking us, so you can't just completely do away with it, but we have to find ways to make it possible and to better share our risks. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly, because that's actually quite a pity, isn't it? If the frontliners have to carry so much risk, sometimes even their lives, as is reflected in the first question. I want to take this last question, even though the signal has been given to wrap this up, because it's a question to Charles. And Charles, so if you can be very brief, the measure of success should reflect how communities view this success. Thanks, Charles, for this statement. Could you provide examples on such success? Maybe just one example, Charles. Can you provide one example on such success?
Yeah, no, okay. I was talking more about the approach to M&E, which has been very much more based on a Western kind of scientific model, evidence-based model, which is okay, but I feel it's not sufficient. So I was talking about the fact that if we are determining measures of success, in a project or in a program or an initiative, the community must have their say, must participate and agree that these are the milestones we see as success. So for me, it's about our approach to evaluation, our approach to determining what success is, to reflect the aspirations of communities.
Exactly.
So that's what I meant.
I think this is really a fantastic clarification and suggestion, because why should communities, or can or do communities not define what success actually means? So this is a very fundamental thing that we can, that looks like a relatively low-hanging fruit, right? We can do this. We can do this, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you both. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, those of you at home who are watching. Thank you for asking your questions. I would now like to go to part 3 of our program, where we will now invite our guests, an extra guest to the floor, the only man on the floor. His name is Kees de Jong. Yeah. Be very careful, Kees. You are the only man, and he's the director of Wilde Ganzen. Look at me, just telling a director to be very careful. I have power as well. And he is going to talk about the future of the shift of power and the Dutch perspectives from the sector with us. We are going to reflect on this together. So I want to know from both of you, what are your takeaways? What would you say are your key takeaways from this? Kees, you can start, since you just welcome, Kees.
Thank you.
I'm sure people at home are clapping for you, but we can't hear them.
Well, the key takeaways, I think one thing which is adamant, which is mentioned several times, that's community philanthropy, local giving in some ways, because a true, resilient and sustainable civil society can only be there if it's really owned by the people themselves and have a constituency. So again, then they're better able to advocate with the government, because they're not considered as agents from other countries. So that's really helpful. But it's a long way to go. It's really a long way to go, because the attitude we have created together, and that was also mentioned, the attitude is of reducing people to beneficiaries. Yet people are very powerful. They have power from within, and that's what we need to realize. People have power from within, communities have power from within, and that has to be valued in the whole chain. Those are my 2 most important things.
Yeah, no, I think this is, it does actually go back to the mindset, doesn't it? It does, because it's not so much, it's not the mindset of we are here to help, but it is what you say, reducing people to beneficiaries. So number of beneficiaries reached, but then they're people, it's their whole lives that we're talking about, right? It's so really having a voice, seeing a full person, being holistic in our approaches are interesting takeaways. Do you have, can you be short about your, because I've seen your papers. What are your key takeaways? But we'll start with you, Birgitta.
Well, I mean, I think this for me is also really the most important topic, but it also raises questions. Yeah. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we should no longer fund local organizations because it should come from within? So where should the money go then? Because we're still dealing with poverty and with low access to services, or low life expectancy rate. It has all gone up, also thanks to development cooperation. Yeah. But maybe when you talk about system change, you need to work from more from a philanthropic, locally ingrained organizations demanding the change. Like what we saw in Argentina just recently is that the law on abortion was changed because of strong local and civil society engagement. There was no external funding involved whatsoever. But what does that mean for our funding? I think it's a question I don't have an answer to. And the other thing, I think what Charles mentioned, because we of course we have to manage our development portfolio in such a way that it is manageable, that we can learn, that we can have skill. And that means also that you cannot have thousands of contracts with local organizations. It's just impossible. So how to go about that? And what one would like to see is more also intermediary organizations in the south. We have them in the north, but what do we have in the south? Well, I can see it with academia. They are working more together. But it would be great if you also have more intermediary organizations in the south that can then, like I think Charles' organization, if I understand his organization well, can then support the grassroots organizations.
Yeah.
That, I think, is an important shift that will help us also to localize further.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I can't skip you, Kitty, but I gave you a little bit more time to think about your key takeaways.
Look, as you've seen, I've taken copious notes, so I have many takeaways, and reducing them to just a few sentences, I think, doesn't do justice to the debate and also to the importance of some of the values that underpin this debate. So not everything is easily, I would say, captured in words. But to me, again, it is about, how do we differentiate localization of aid with empowerment and having voice and helping to shape? It's not just a question of money. It really is about the power relationship. Yes, and part of these things, whether I like it or not, I cannot change the fact, looking under my chair, that I represent a certain community. But as I would also like to plead that, local communities don't just want to be seen as beneficiaries. I don't just want to be seen as a funder.
No.
There is also no equity if I am only seen as a bag of money. I'm not a bag of money. I'm a committed, passionate professional, and I have a whole organization of committed, passionate professionals working for us at embassy level here in The Hague. And so some of the things that were mentioned, for example, by Rachael, support that embassy can provide to human rights defenders, to environmental rights defenders, that's what we ought to do. That's equally important to me as how I spend the money. Do we have to find ways to find more, I would say, engagement with local community? Again, that's not just about funding. Absolutely. I do think it also requires a lot of capacity. Capacity we may not always have at embassy level. We are spread incredibly thin. It's not always a question of not willing. It's also a question sometimes of not being able to do what I think needs to be done. It's something we really need to reflect on. We cannot be everything, but we do want to be a true partner. I do think there are things that we can do. I was mentioning lengthening the duration of our engagement. Let's not call it project, the duration of our engagement with local communities and with other intermediate actors, because I don't believe that you can get systemic change in 2 years, let alone in 2 months. I will still need to make sure that I abide by law. Right? So we do have to look at fiduciary risk management. Yeah. But even within those rules, I think we have to look smartly at what we can do. And we can now do 10 years programs. We never did that before.
Yeah.
But we can do it. So trying to find that mindset of, you're not just a beneficiary, I'm not just a bag of money, I think will require a change on both sides. I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to see what we can do. But I ask everyone to take us by the hand and don't think that everything can be done. Yeah. Because again, it is law. I have to abide by what politicians set as the rules, both in terms of budgets, priorities, and countries we work in. But within that, I think if we can try to see each other as committed professionals wanting to alleviate poverty and provide the perspective of a life in dignity to people, I think we can get a lot more done than we do currently.
Yeah, this is really great. Thank you for sharpening this for us as well. So really, yes, you are not just a beneficiary. You're not reduced to a beneficiary in the Global South, but you would also, as a ministry and in your roles, not like to be reduced to bags of money, even though, of course, you can imagine from the Global South, that's what is visible. Right, so it's really about relationship building and really authenticating, creating authentic collaboration with shared goals. We all want to alleviate poverty. There's something at stake for everyone involved in this relationship. Yeah, please go ahead.
Maybe I can add to that, because I thought it was interesting that Charles said, that he thinks that at this part of the world we still see that part of the world that needs saving. Yeah. To be honest, I think my part of the world also needs saving. I mean, there are just huge challenges, not only in the south, for whom we happen to work right now, but also in the north when it comes to climate or inequality or populism or many, many challenges. So it is not that black and white.
Yeah, no, exactly. I have a question for you. Should I ask the question and then you can add your thought to that?
Okay, I'll try.
Because, Kees, I want to know how you do this with Giving for Change, which is your program, you're a partner in, and in Shift the Power, where you are also a part of. So I want to hear a little bit more about your work.
Yeah, our work is about, in fact, is a lot about community philanthropy and bringing this forward as a more final solution. I think it's not instead, it's just a next path.
Yeah.
It's a next pathway which takes a long time, but in the end, it's more sustainable than the other pathway. And then what we do with community philanthropy, we support the communities. We in this program also we allow the communities do their own decision making, setting their own priorities. We don't talk about reporting. We update each other upward and downward on progress. We are only there as Wereld Café, as the Dutch lead for compliancy reasons. So even the visionary lead is not with us, but in the south.
Yeah.
And even the compliancy thing, we think about it even partly as far as possible, turn it over to the south, but that takes some decisions. What we also do, we advocate with national governments and with international donors about this community philanthropy thing, so that you really can have finally a real civil society owned by civilians. What else do? We have the PML framework, of course, the monitoring framework. We now are trying out something new. It's called, we do it through Pando, where also the communities set their own priorities and their own successes and their own things they want to measure, because they also should have access to the knowledge we have. So shared knowledge is not upward, it's also downward, and they contribute to what they need.
Yeah.
Those are some of the things. And I still think more work can be done. But I'm really glad with you sitting here, because you demonstrate a new way. You have to set the example yourself. So it's about, you talk about a humble servant, but some way it is. It requires it requires to be low and to be flexible and even vulnerable, to share, to have real partnership. And we and what's interesting, we have two contracts. One contract is with the partnership part, where there's high trust and high collaboration. And how can we disseminate that to the other part with all the rules, with the thick package of all the rules? And I think there are some ways forward. We discussed before. One thing is, I still feel you are a bit entangled in this top-down thinking, because you're answerable. You have to be answerable for what you're doing. But what you see, how we achieve change these days, now it's really bottom-up. It's the masses who dictate shell. It's the masses, even with the soccer game now, that have really influence, if you see what's going on in Europe and Hungary. So that requires different thinking, and that requires innovation and courage. But I think, so we can try to think about changing the tender system, but also think beyond the tender system. What would be wise to do, and to step out of this frame of tender system where development is deliverable from the outside. It cannot be delivered from the outside. It has to be from the inside and from bottom up. And how to do this?
Yeah.
To sit together, it's the only way.
It's the only, whoa, so we've started. We're sitting together. We've sat together also internationally, really bottom up, top down, left, right, everybody together. And really thinking also more long term, and really thinking collaboratively, so more shared goals and not measuring success based on what we need to report only, because of course we do need to do this reporting to sustain this, but really striving for longer term commitments and believing in local communities, because it started with the song, everything we need is in the community. And I would like to end there. Everything that is needed is in the community. We have to trust that. We have to trust that. We have to trust our partners that they know this and that they can work with this. So I have a closed question for you at the end. So isn't development also about daring to try out things, right? Do we dare? Do we actually dare to try out new things? Are we being bold when we try these new things out? And can we be more flexible? Because we've heard a lot about these systems that seem to tie people down. So it's a closed question because I've gone over time. You can only
what,
say
yes
yes
or
or
no?
no. Yeah. No, you can, of course. You are my guest. I can't be. And what is time?
I've always loved civil disobedience. That's why I love civil society. So I'm not going to stick to a yes or no. Sorry. Are we bold enough? No, maybe not. That's why we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
Because we want to be inspired. We want to learn how we can do this together. It takes two flints to make a fire.
Yeah.
And whether one flint is big and the other one is small, it doesn't really matter. The end result is what matters. For me, the end result will always be the same thing. My metric of success is poverty eradication and reducing inequalities and eradicating them. Localization and giving power is a big part of that. It's not the only part. Right? It is also about what we do with governments, because we can do a lot with the local communities, but if the enabling policies still aren't there, they still will not get the secure, sustainable future they need. So let's see each other as partners. We want to work and listen with you to try and accommodate to the extent that we can. Not everything can be done, but what we can do, we will do.
Yeah.
Let's also recognize that beyond NGOs and beyond localization, there is a whole other world there around macroeconomics, about enabling policies. That's also part of our job. And let's try to see that these are woven together in synergy, that there are complementarities, and that we work with each other based on our added value. And I see and we recognize the value, the added value, the intrinsic value of local communities. It's an issue of empowerment, and it's an issue of efficiency and effectiveness in achieving our goals. Yeah. So in that sense, you can count on our commitment. And for me, this is the first of a dialogue, and it won't be the last.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to more dialogues as we continue to, apply friction and let things shine. Because I don't think these are easy conversations. This has flowed pretty easily. But I think it's not that easy to figure this out in practice. And how about flexibility? Because there's been quite a call for flexibility.
There is much more flexibility than we tend to believe, especially within Power of Voices. And I think we should really try to discover what kind of space is there already, which we don't use. Yeah. Because it's much more possible. Yeah.
How can we discover this? If the flexibility is there, but we don't know.
To have these discussions. And many things, so much is possible. And somehow, maybe as a civil society organization, we are also a bit afraid of change. Because this is a way of been doing it all the time. So we should also be a bit more brave.
Yeah. Okay, great. Another call for bravery, boldness. The flexibility is there. We're not always aware of this. Birgitta, is there anything you'd like to add? Because I'm going to close now.
Well, I think everything has been said. Let me just give compliments to the civil society on how they dealt with COVID-19. I think they did a wonderful job, very often without any funding, with information, with holding their governments accountable, with service delivery for vulnerable people. So a big, big, big thank you, and applauding civil society for the work done under COVID-19.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, because I think when we talk about empowerment, I can imagine that is very difficult, very challenging, but incredibly empowering to be able to do that on your terms, on your own. And incredibly empowering for everyone, both the people watching and the people doing this, taking on these challenges. So that's really great. I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you, Kitty. Thank you, Birgitta. Thank you, Kees. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Charles. It's been an incredibly interesting, thought-provoking conversation in which I have learned so much from all of you. I hope you have all learned from each other. It's a really beautiful view from where I'm sitting. I have Kitty here and Charles behind her. I have Birgitta here, I have Rachel behind her. I have Kees here and Charles behind him. You didn't know that, but Charles is behind you all the way. And I think this is a really beautiful view. One day, when COVID is over, we will sit here together in a circle, and we will continue this conversation where we will continue to explore how can we create more balanced power. How can we recognize each other in our power, actually, when we have shifted power? How can we recognize? Rachel is bringing something as an activist, as a human rights activist. Charles is bringing something as a local player who knows what's going on in the context, who knows about M&E and knows how to contextualize it. How can we bring this together and form policy frameworks that work for everyone and create sustainable, sustained poverty alleviation and equality in the world. And it's a beautiful image, but in this conversation, I believe in it more. So thank you both. Thank you all. And have a great evening to those of you at home. Thank you for your questions. Thank you to the organizers, Wilde Ganze and vice versa. And thank you to the ministry for inviting us to this wonderful space with lots of light and a wonderful technical team. Have a good evening and good night.
Can make a difference. We'll start by looking within. From dependence to ascendance. Come on, y'all, let's shift the power.
Yeah, you got the power in your hand to make a positive change in the land. Don't you know that local is locker? Maka maka, where we're helping one another. Alone I can go real fast, but when we put our hands together we can go way past. And how do you know? There is power in unity. Everything we ever want is right there in the community.